I'm Ryan Bosling, and today I'm going to be reviewing Hulu's new television extravaganza, Alien Earth. But I won't just be reviewing it in terms of if I think it's good or not. I'll be looking at it like a script doctor, so as if the writer and director came to me and gave me the script before they filmed it and asked, what needs to be improved. I'll give 3 key points, things that are wrong with the script, and then I'll give solutions to make it better. And I might be wondering, who am I to say this stuff? And so, briefly, my background is I have an MFA in creative writing fiction. I was a quarterfinalist in the Nichols Fellowship. I've taught courses at university level in English literature and composition, done a ton of workshops and craft talks with famous writers who were nominated for or won the Pulitzer Prize, the Booker Prize, National Book Award, and so on. And basically, I've been reading and writing a lot, and I'm bringing that experience, that background, that eye to movies and television to show you guys how I see it. First, I want to give a little bit of context. Like every guy on this planet, and a lot of women, I'm sure, I'm a fan of the Aliens franchise, especially the first two. But I'm not a fanboy. I don't have like toys and statuettes and stuff like that. I just like the movies a lot. Those two, especially the second, because it has action, adventure, it's scary, it's a little funny. And in terms of the crafting of it, it has a good premise, has a good plot, and has iconic, really quickly drawn characters. And in fact, when that conversation comes up and people ask, what's your favorite movie or one of your top 5 movies or whatever, I always go to Aliens just automatically. And I explain what I just said about it being good, but also I like it because of how influential it is. It's got to be one of the most influential movies in recent times, easily, because of how basically everything about it has become iconic. Anytime you see an action movie, an adventure movie, people fighting zombies or like insect type aliens, you're seeing they're going to be copying or be influenced by aliens, basically. So when I heard about the show, I was just really excited. And then a little bit later on, I heard about the premise of the show where aliens are on Earth, and I loved it because I think that's what we all wanted to see when we saw those first few movies. You think, what would happen if these creatures landed on Earth? And you imagine like the war, the battles that would go on, the abandoned cities, the chaos. How would humanity deal with that? And then just like a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, maybe now, the reviews for the show started coming out and they're really good. Like some are great. And I was even more pumped. And then about a week ago now, I saw this first episode. It kind of sucks. The show sucks. I'm not impressed with it. I'll go more into my review later of it and the problems and so on. But I'll say right now, like if I had to give it a score out of 10, this first episode, I would give it a 5. And it's kind of depressing. I mean, it's disappointing. I don't really give a shit, but it was a little disappointing. And what makes it so disappointing is that it's bad at like basic things, the most basic things. And I just wonder how people who are so experienced in television and movies could do this. And this isn't the only show that did this. Like so many shows and movies make really basic errors. So what went wrong, guys? What the hell happened here? Well, I'm going to go into that, but first I'm going to do a brief synopsis of the episode. Then I'll do a traditional review of just like what I liked, what I didn't like, and why I'm giving it like a 5 out of 10. Then I'll go into the meat of this review or this workshop and talk about the 3 things that I think they messed up. And I'll give concrete examples. And then I'll go into how to fix that stuff, like what they should have done, while keeping like the spirit of what they're trying to do with the show. I'm not going to just make like a different show. I'll fix what they have. The story follows 2 plots, which are braided throughout into the end where they converge. And plot B, the smaller one, a Yutani ship, and Yutani is the corporation, the name of the corporation. Yutani ship is in deep space with a cargo of creatures already on board, among them the facehuggers and eggs that we recognize from the other films, as well as some other creatures like a spider eyeball and a centipede. And there's no explanation for how or where the crew got all this or how the company knew about the alien life already. Some of the crew seem uncomfortable with their mission and cargo, but the cyborg captain ignores them and pushes the mission onward. And as this is going on, there's an unexplained glitch in their computer. They all go to sleep and they head to Earth to return their payload. Meanwhile, in the A plot, which is the larger plot, a terminally sick girl lives at a tropical island research facility for Prodigy. Prodigy being one of the 5 corporations which control humanity, with Yutani being another. And her consciousness is transferred to a synthetic body, which has superhuman strength and will never die of old age or disease. So basically, she has a second chance at life now. She renames herself Wendy. As she undergoes monitoring, as she acclimates to the new body, she's barred from contacting her brother, a medic for Prodigy stationed elsewhere on the planet. But she still spies on him via camera feeds, so she obviously still wants to get back in contact with him. Other kids come to the facility to undergo the same operation, and she becomes their mentor, helping them through the process. These 2 storylines converge when the Yutani ship, the Maginot, is shown barreling towards impact with Earth, out of control, and with the aliens somehow loose on the ship. All the crew are presumably dead except for the cyborg captain, who seems to prioritize the safety and return of the cargo over the lives of the crew. The ship crashes in a major city run by Prodigy, just a few blocks from where Wendy's brother and his team are stationed. They respond to do search and rescue. Wendy happens to see a newsfeed of the crash and her brother, and she offers her and her team services to the CEO to go help with the search and rescue, but she really wants to reunite with her brother. The CEO agrees and they fly off the island to the site. Meanwhile, her brother's team is being slowly picked off by the creatures on the ship, having no idea of what's going on. I'm going to give a quick review, an overall idea of what I thought about it, starting with the good, because there was good, even though overall I thought this was pretty bad. I like the original orchestral music that they had in this. I think they used some of the songs, some of the soundtrack from the first movie, but the original stuff was good. It fit with the first movie. It was true to the Alien universe. And I would say the same thing about the ship design, the interior, and the uniforms. It looked good, and it looked just like what we know from the first movie. I thought the acting was good. It was very solid. I'm not saying the characters were good. I'm just saying the acting was fine. But the main thing that I really liked, and that I was really impressed with in this show, was the mood. And by that, I mean that the show has an overwhelming, very palpable sense of dread, to the point that it was almost uncomfortable to watch at times. Because in the show, the corporations control everything and everybody, and yet even with that control, they're leading humanity towards catastrophe. And it feels like there's nothing anybody can do. And so that brings me to something else connected to mood, and that the show is very relevant. Back when the first movie came out, the biggest companies in the world were, I think, steel and oil. Now they're tech companies spending tens of billions of dollars on AI. Along with that, we have a rise of billionaires who are basically man-children, and they control our social lives, our political lives, access to info, economy, planetary health. So the idea of these corporations and these billionaires or trillionaires controlling everything and leading us down a dangerous path feels pretty relevant. Now, usually creating a great atmosphere and being relevant is very difficult, so I just wanted to credit these creators for doing that with the show. All that being said, the show sucked. I gave it a 5 out of 10, right? So what didn't I like about it? Well, the plot was utterly predictable. I knew what each scene was going to do right as it started. There was no real action, tension, or horror on screen in this episode. It all happened in the past. And I know I'd bet money that as the series goes on, like in the next few episodes, they're going to do flashbacks showing how the company knew how about the aliens out there, how the crew got it, how the aliens got loose, and why the ship crashed and all that. But like, I should see more of that. Like, this is an alien show. There should be some horror, some action in this, more than there was. There were no effective big moments or set pieces or memorable lines of dialogue, which is utterly at odds with the identity of Alien 1 and 2. Like, think of how many big moments, set pieces, and good lines of dialogue were in those movies, right? That's why those movies are great. And this didn't have it. So it just doesn't feel like, it's not at the quality level of Alien and Aliens. Now, I know some people might say, well, they had a few scenes of action, like where the cyborg captain is in the mother room, the supercomputer room, and the alien is chasing that woman. The woman comes to the door like she wants to be let in, right? That's one scene that's kind of like action horror, I guess. And then the second scene would be towards the end during the search and rescue when the brother and his team are on board, and those two soldiers get handcuffed to the pole by the cyborg captain, and those aliens kill them. And so, yeah, I guess it's sort of actiony, sort of horror-y, but the problem is we've seen both those kinds of scenes before. Like, we know the cyborg captain wasn't going to open the door and the woman was going to die, right? We've seen aliens come up on people when they're behind or in front of a locked door and kill them from behind. That's happened a million times now. And we've seen people who either don't know an alien like dropped on their head, like a face hugger or something, or where they can't move their arms and like the face hugger is coming towards them. We've seen this stuff before. It's like stuff that's old and predictable. No bueno, right? As a writer, director, just say no. Like, it's okay that if you're writing and you do that like in your initial scripts, like everyone's gonna write crap in their first drafts. But when you come back, you got to cut out that old stuff and that predictable stuff and find a fresh approach. I know that fans of this episode are gonna come back at me if they listen to this. I mean, no one's listening to this to me talk, but if they did, they would say that the reason this episode didn't have like tension and excitement and all this stuff going on was because this is the first episode and it's just setting up everything for the season. And so I would counter that with every episode, whether it's the first or the 10th, should be exciting, riveting even, gluing you to the screen and making you want to watch more. And I would say that's even more true, more so for the first episode, because you want people to stick around for the second, the third, the fourth, all the way up to, I think there's 8 episodes in this season of Alien Earth. So this, in a way, you should say this should be the best episode, right? The most exciting, the most interesting. But even if you want to ignore that, every episode should stand on its own. It's its own story with a beginning, middle, and end. And yes, you have to pay attention to the whole season, but you also have to pay attention to each episode. And every episode needs movement, which you can get through plot or character development. And I would say that there was actually zero movement, either through plot or character development in this episode, despite the illusion of there being movement. Like, people would say, oh, well, Wendy became a robot and this ship crashed on Earth and now these aliens are loose. Well, I'll explain in a little bit what I mean by no, that's just an illusion. There isn't really any development. Nothing really changed in a true sense that you really want to create a good story. And so I'm giving this a 5 out of 10 because it's not the worst thing ever. It's not horrible, but it's thoroughly mediocre. And so if I weren't watching this to do reviews, I would probably give this maybe 1 or 2 more episodes to start getting interesting before just dropping the show, because nothing's really going on. Nothing's grabbing me so far. So I think 5 out of 10 is a fair score. So let's get to the problems. Now, again, I'm not going to look at this in terms of nitpicking every little stupid thing in every scene, because there are dozens and dozens of things that I noticed. But I'm approaching this like a script doctor, giving just a handful of notes to the writer to help them make the whole thing much, much better. And so the problems that I'm bringing up permeate every scene, probably every minute. And so with just a few key things to focus on, you'll see how this whole show, this whole episode, and probably the season by extension, once you build it out, could be much stronger. So let's start with problem number 1. Tone. The tone of this episode and of this world they're creating is almost completely wrong. And there's 2 ways that it's wrong. There's audio and visual. Because it doesn't have to do with script, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. But I had to bring it up because it's so bad that it constantly took me out of the show, and it leaves like a bad taste. Like, it's real cheap, and it feels like imitation Alien. Not good. Just like imitation Crab, not good. So with audio, I mean that at several points in the show, I think like 2 or 3, they have contemporary music, meaning contemporary to us today in 2025. Like, I think they have like a rock song or like a rap song and then like a punk song or something like that. And it just felt so stupid and so off to be playing music that we listen to today in a world that's, I think, about 100 years in the future. Like, imagine if we did a movie today that takes place in like Baghdad with this military team going into like this crazy, tense, tactical situation. It's going to be action. It's going to be scary. And then they pass some guys on the street just like listening to Scott Joplin, the entertainer, right? Like, it's just, what the fuck? It just feels off. It feels stupid. It doesn't fit. It's just dumb. It takes you out of the show and out of the universe to listen to like modern music, or I think they had one song out of like Vietnam era. Just don't do that. You can make up your own music that fits. And then they also had, I think, some original like background tracks that are orchestral, and they also didn't feel as good as the original stuff from the first show. So earlier I said I like the music, but I like the music that fit from the first show. I mean, excuse me, not show, movie, from Alien. I don't like the new stuff that they're doing for this show. Now, in terms of the visuals, I like the ship, but I absolutely hate the design for the planet. Like, the planet just looks like modern day London mixed with Hong Kong and like LA, downtown LA. And that's not how I imagine the alien universe looking on Earth. Like, it doesn't fit the world at all. And like, the sky is beautiful. They have beautiful tropical island. The water looks clean and great. Like, their world looks better than our world, and it's supposedly a dystopia. It just doesn't fit. Now, I'm not saying it has to look like Blade Runner. They could do something new, and they should, but it shouldn't look like modern, Malaysia or something like that. It's just ridiculous. And also, the cinematography, I thought, was really bad. Like, the camera would it tends to hang at the end of scenes, like it kind of floats there when the characters are done talking. And they do this stuff where the camera like swirls and like turns upside down several scenes and holds too long, and it just felt like bad B90s, early 2000s TV, or like late night movies. Just really bad, like old Buffy the Vampire type stuff. Really cheap and dumb and lazy. There are two concrete design choices that I want to briefly mention. One is the uniforms for the soldiers, the brothers team. The soldiers, if you just took everything out of context and just looked at the soldiers and their uniforms, it doesn't look like sci-fi or like an alien. It doesn't look like it comes from an alien universe. It's basically dudes with cheap tactical gear, like lightweight, cheap tactical gear. And that's it. Like, they almost look like they're going to go play paintball or something. Really cheap, really bad. When you contrast that to Aliens, James Cameron's second movie, yes, I know that's in the future from the first one, which is where this one takes place. But they had a unique look. It was kind of sci-fi because they had like the eyepieces and stuff like that, and they had kind of a futuristic Vietnam look. This doesn't have a look. It just looks cheap. Like, they couldn't afford costumes. The second choice that I really hated, but it was kind of funny actually, were the helicopter cruisers at the end, where Wendy and her team fly off the island to go to the search and rescue. Those helicopters look so rounded and bubbly and had no shape. But here's the thing: it looked like they were copying Avatar. Remember those Avatar helicopters, which is done by James Cameron. So like, they're copying James Cameron from Avatar, but he did Aliens, and now it looks worse than anything he ever did. It's just like an insult. It's just so horrible and ugly. So basically, I think if they're going to get another season of the show, they need to sack the creative talent and get a new cinematographer, a new composer, and a new artistic director. And I'm sure these people are nice and they're good at what they do, but they just don't fit this show at all. They need to get new people to make this look and sound like where it needs to be. Character. Any character in this who has more than 3 lines of dialogue is unlikable, or at best bland. And so first I go over unlikable. You could basically go down a list of every character in this thing, and you'll see how unlikable they are. We'll start with Wendy, who's a brat, if not a complete bitch. She ignores people doing their job and trying to help her. So like in one scene, one of the kids is on the operating table about to be transferred into the new body. And she's standing next to them, this person, I forget who it was, but she's standing there comforting the person, like talking to them. And so the doctor comes in and asks her to move out of the way, if she can move out of the way so he could finish setting up, the operating room, the table. And she says like, move around or move, something like that. And like really quickly, like a brat, and not even showing him the respect to look at him. She just like says it from the corner of her mouth and then keeps talking to the kid on the table. And it's just like so bratty. In another scene, she's doing a test, so she has headphones on. I think they're testing her hearing or something, her acuity. And then she sees the news that about the crash and her brother being there, and she just like yanks the headphones off and gets up and starts walking towards the screen to look at the news. And the guy's like, "Oh, you gotta put those on. We gotta finish." And she just completely ignores them and like zooms in on the news and keeps doing whatever she wants. And then after that, when she goes to the CEO's office to tell him that she wants to go on the mission, the CEO tells her not now because he's busy talking and planning his own stuff with his assistant. And so her mentor tells him, "Come on, let's go." And she says, "No." And then she keeps talking, like just butts in and talks. And so all these things, it's unlikable, it's bratty. Now you might say, it's good for characters to be assertive, right? And I have no problem with that. That's fine for characters to be assertive, to push their side, to even butt in or to try to get their way forcefully. But the problem is there are no other sides to her personality except this brattiness and bitchiness. And since this is all, she's just annoying. Like she's so annoying that I want her dead. I hope she dies in the next episode. And I'm being serious about that. I want her out of the show because I just dislike her so much. And you can keep going with all the characters. So her mentor, the guy with the like white blue hair or whatever, he's kind of creepy. Like when they're flying to go to the rescue site towards the end of the episode, he just like stares at her and starts whispering about, he gives this speech about how humans used to be food and we forgot that we're still food. Like imagine you're at work and one of your coworkers just comes up to you and starts whispering how humans are food. Like that's weird, right? That's strange. Well, that's what this guy does. And he has no personality otherwise. He just kind of stands and just says like factual stuff and then he does this. So he's unlikable. On the spaceship, the Maginot, there's I think a synth. I'm not sure exactly what he is, but his name is Mr. Tang, I think, if I heard correctly. And he's like super freaky, this creepy dude who like stalks a girl and he gets close to them. And he always has like a little smile on his lips. He's like, hee, like a creepy dude. And so he's unlikable. The prodigy CEO is this rich kid who does whatever he wants. He's a twerp. Okay, so he's unlikable. On the ship, the cyborg security officer just ignores everybody and pushes for the mission at all costs. And he's an emotionless psychopath who does things that will obviously kill his own crew and destroy humanity, most likely. So he's unlikable. The search and rescue team is blatantly incompetent. And so for me, I really hate seeing that in shows when you supposedly have like tough commandos or whatever, and they're just so stupid. So for me, that's unlikable. All these characters are unlikable. There isn't one who's likable. But the characters who are a little better, at best, they're bland. And so people that I would put into that category are like the prodigy CEO's assistant, who's that bald older guy. He doesn't really have any personality, so he's just bland. The doctor and psychologist are just bland. They have no real personality. Wendy's brother doesn't really have personality either. He's a human equivalent of a wet rag. So I basically went through every character in this who has more than a few lines. They're very unlikable or they're just bland, non-existent. Okay, so this isn't good. But here's maybe the surprising thing. Characters don't have to be likable, but they have to be fascinating. And none are. So the problem is if you take a character who's unlikable and only unlikable, and that's the only thing about their personality, the only thing about them, period, that we know is that they're a brat, a punk, a creepy, or whatever, then that's not interesting, right? They're just one note and they're repellent. So this is a failure of character. And so now I want to take a moment to talk about a really big problem with the show, a fundamental bedrock problem, which also introduces my iron law. Kids in movies and shows always suck ass. They suck. They're horrible. And for some reason, this show decided to make them the main characters. All right, so let me explain. Think about when you were 9 years old. What were you really good at? I mean, really, really good, to where you were so good that you were equal to or better than trained adults in that same thing? And the answer is nothing. All right. No matter how good you were at track and field, Usain Bolt was better than you. No matter how much of a badass you thought you were at basketball, Kobe Bryant and like 10,000 other guys on this planet were way, way, way better than you. I mean, it's not even a competition, right? And so my point is, kid actors can't act. No matter how good they are for kids, they're not actually good at the acting level of Hollywood and adults. Now, there's two interesting exceptions, maybe. The kid from Sixth Sense, I think his name is Haley Joel Osment. Everyone went crazy over him, right? He was this amazing kid actor. But then a few years back, I saw him acting as an adult. He's actually a really bad actor. Like, I was shocked. He's very bad. I would say he's not mediocre. Like, as an actor, I would say he's a 4 out of 10 in his abilities. They're pretty bad. And so I was thinking, well, did he get worse? And I think the answer is no, he didn't get worse. The thing is, he was always that level, but as a kid, it seemed good. And now that he's an adult, it's not good because now he's trying to play different characters and his limitations come out. And the other kid actor who people went crazy over was Dakota Fanning. And the same thing held true. As an adult, I saw her act in some things, and she's okay, but she's less than average at the Hollywood level. There are a lot of Hollywood actresses who are better than her. She's just okay. But as a kid, she was amazing. But she wasn't actually that good. Okay? So kids can't act. And I know what you're thinking. This episode doesn't have kid actors really. They're only there for like a few minutes, and then it's adult actors playing kids. But here's the problem with that. When you're 9 years old, how rich and varied and experienced and layered was your emotional and intellectual life? And the answer is not very. And so kids make terrible characters even if they're played by adults, because you're taking potentially great actors who have spent years training and honing their craft and playing rich characters, bringing all their emotional capacity to these characters to bring them alive. And then you're reducing their toolkit by like 60% because they have to pretend to be a kid. I want to give two examples for how much kids suck in drama, right? So imagine you're given the option of the following. You can either go to an awesome new restaurant with a full bar and outdoor patio with your best friends and family. You could go on a stunning hike through nature with mountain views and a waterfall in a place you've never been before. You could have mind-scorching sex with the person you love most, with the hottest body of anyone you've ever been with. Or you could go to a junior high school play. All right, nobody is going to choose the high school play, no matter how awesome it is. Because whenever you go to a school play, every single person in that audience wants to be somewhere else. They're only there because if they don't go, they're going to be picked up by Child Protective Services for being a bad parent or a bad family member, right? You're forced to go there. They're all held hostage. The second example I want to talk about comes from two of my favorite shows. I still love them, but they had a problem. And so the first show was Star Trek The Next Generation. And of course, you know where I'm going. Wesley Crusher. All right. Wesley Crusher sucked. He was horrible in the show. He was a terrible character. The actor was pretty damn bad, and he's still bad. I saw him in Star Trek Picard, and he was horrible. But I'm not talking about this to shit on the actor Will Wheaton, because he was just a kid, and he was just doing what kids do, right? Acting bad. They're bad actors. It's not his fault. The fault was with Gene Roddenberry for thinking he had to add a kid to the Starship Enterprise, right? And so the show took a hit, and it was better once he left. Now, actually, Star Trek's kind of interesting because they've had kids who worked. So I'm thinking of Alexander in Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is Worf's kid. I didn't mind him so much. He was kind of a brat, kind of a punk. Kid was a little annoying, the actor. But the good thing about him is he wasn't a main character. He was there very briefly. He was just in and out. He would pop in, and he was there basically to reflect on Worf, to put pressure on Worf in various ways. So I was okay to overlook it. He was a minor supporting character, and that was fine. And then in Deep Space Nine, Nog was a kid at the start, and he ended up being a good character later on because the character was older and the actor was older, and so that he could handle the material. They could do more sophisticated things with him. And he had a really good character arc where he joined the Federation, and then he had PTSD and stuff like that. And I think those episodes and that storyline is actually, that stuff is some of people's favorite stuff from Deep Space Nine, when he like gets addicted to the holodeck and stuff and he can't face reality. So work there because yes, he was a kid, but they waited until the kid and the character were old enough to handle the stuff, and to basically he was an adult even though he wasn't a kid. So it worked. The other show I want to bring up is Homeland. And I think season 3, I'm pretty sure it was 3, but maybe 2, something like that, 3. Dana Brody, the daughter of the main guy, she kind of took over the show, and she was like this bratty girl who wanted to date Timothy Chalamet, who was in that. That was like his first big role, by the way. And I think she was like 14 or 15, the character and the actress. And it was just like silly middle school, early high school crap. Nobody wants to see that in an adult show. And so that leads me to the next point, that if you're watching a show for adults, we want to see adults doing adult stuff. Kid actors and characters should only have the spotlight in shows where the target audience is the same age as those characters or younger. So in Disney and Nickelodeon and that kind of stuff, sure, you could have kids in that because you can have kids watching kids acting and they can't tell the difference. They don't know that they're watching garbage, right? They like that stuff. So that's fine for them. But Aliens, a franchise where the characters spend their time getting intergalactically face fucked and split open at the chest on camera, that's not a show for kids. So we don't need kid actors. We don't need kid characters in that. It does not work. This is a terrible decision. I think it's potentially catastrophic to base this season around kids. Enough about the Iron Law and the danger of kid characters. I want to get back to the meat of the problem with the characters in this episode. And there's a huge problem, which creates a hole in the center of all the characters and a hole in the center of the show, really. Just like a chest burster came out of it, killing it. But I'm going to focus on Wendy because she's the main character. Earlier, I said Wendy's personality was just bratty and unlikable, and how that was a bad setup for her in terms of personality. But there's another thing that defines her, sort of, and that's her body, right? Before she was a human, now she's a hybrid. All the characters in the show interact with her because of her hybridness. And so that's what defines her. The doctors, the other kids, the CEO, they only deal with her and look at her and assess her in terms of being this experimental human robot thing. But there needs to be more, because the externals can't define characters alone, or you end up with a shallow character and story. To have a true character arc and an effective, meaningful plot, you need more. And so by more, I mean their interiority. Characters need personality, desires, and fears. And the externals can affect those things, but the externals, and by externals, I mean like the look of their body and the fact that she's a hybrid, that shouldn't define them alone. The problem with Wendy is we don't have a baseline for her at the start of the story. As soon as she was introduced, she was turned into a super being. And so there's no starting point for her to change from. If I don't know who she was, I can't appreciate who she becomes. There's no contrast, no place to grow, and thus no possibility for a true character arc. And so what all this means, what I've said so far, is that after a full hour of television, there is zero character. There's not a single character in this show, or in the series so far. And Wendy, the main character, is not a real character. She's not a person or a hybrid. She's just a mannequin. I want to take a second and zoom out and look at this show from the point of view of the whole season rather than just this one episode, based off what I've seen so far. And so that is the story. Well, it's something interesting that I noticed afterwards. And that's this episode begins with a placard or a sign, that gives the definitions for the difference between cyborgs, hybrids, and synths. And since they define that at the very start, like on a black screen with, I think, green writing, and that's all you see, that means it's a huge deal to this show, right? That's like the central thing. It's like a sign with like blaring sirens and lights that this is important. All these different forms of life, these human life things. And so what I was wondering afterwards is, how do these creatures, these beings, these cyborgs, hybrids, and synths really differ, aside from shallow physical characteristics, from each other and from normal humans? Because from what I've seen on screen, they're all exactly the same as us, normal organic humans. And so if you look at the examples of each, you've got the security officer on the Maginot. He's basically a human, just a dick. And we've all seen plenty of dicks on this planet. Now, the mentor to Wendy, the guy with the white hair, I'm pretty sure he's a synth. I'm not sure. I'm not certain they haven't really defined everybody, but I think he's supposed to be artificial. And he's treated like a high-ranking officer in the company, like any important human that we've ever seen or heard about, right? He's just another officer almost, because he has some sort of authority there. Then if you look at Wendy, who's a hybrid, she acts and is treated like a pampered elite teen athlete. So all these characters that I just mentioned, they're not normal humans, right? They're either a cyborg, a synth, or a hybrid. But they all act and are treated completely like normal humans. And so that made me wonder, why is this show making a big deal about defining these different forms of artificial or enhanced life at the very start of the series and the show, right? Why is it a big deal? And so if there's no difference in how they're treated or how they act or how they think or feel, really, then is there a difference at all between them in a meaningful sense, in a sense of character? And it feels to me like the problem here is that the writer director started the show from wanting to have artificial beings fight the aliens because he thought it'd be different and cool and would like make sense tactically, because I guess the aliens can't sense them through heat or whatever. And also these beings, like these droids or whatever you want to call them, are stronger than us, right? So it'd be a better way to fight them. But then the thing is, I don't think the writer director really has anything deeper to say about that. He only made this choice because he thought it'd be different and cool, but there's nothing more. And so that worries me about the series thematically, that he's based this whole show around that one idea of having hybrids and cyborgs fighting aliens. And it's just going to be empty spectacle. It's not meaningful. He's not saying anything deep about AI or artificial life or organic versus artificial and so on. So that's something I'm going to watch out for, but I'm kind of worried about that. I have a bad feeling about this. The plot sucked. The plot of this episode was forced and illogical, with the characters acting stupid, with the purpose of creating plot points to set up the series' central conceits, which is having Earth at risk of alien invasion with artificial humans fighting them. And so I'm going to point out a bunch of examples of where characters act stupid or things kind of happen ham-handedly. So the first one that really bothered me was on the Maginot, with Mr. Tang, the synthetic, being so obviously dangerous and such an obvious, horrific crewmate to have. And yet nobody does anything. The guy stares at a woman. He stalks one of the women. He stands close to people. he sits close next to another woman. When he's asked a question, he doesn't answer for a long time, almost like he's ignoring it. And then when he answers, it's with a little attitude, like he doesn't directly answer the question. And so, why would anyone put up with this? You know, he's a danger to the mission and to everybody. You can't trust him. And so, if these are normal humans, normal officers on board a ship, whether that's a research vessel or a merchant ship or a military ship, you would handle this person, right? Any professional would do that. And yet these guys don't. They just let him do whatever. They're not too worried. Everybody hates him, but they don't do anything about it. They don't really say too much about it. The security officer just says he's going to handle him, but the guy still acts horrible even after he says that. So it's just dumb that they continue to put up with it. And it's just there because we're probably going to get flashbacks later of Mr. Tang somehow, creating problems through incompetence or through evil or something like that, right? He's going to sabotage the mission. So that's one example. Now, on this ship, they mention that they lost a lot of men getting the cargo. So they know the danger of these alien creatures, presumably, because a lot of them were killed, I assume. And yet, they have no problem being on the ship with the cargo. Like, they don't really push back thinking, this stuff is crazy. I'm not going to go to sleep with this stuff here. Like if I were on that ship, I wouldn't go into cryo sleep with those aliens on board, knowing that those things killed so many of the crew already, right? Like that's just stupid. So it's another dumb thing where these characters are walking into catastrophe with their eyes open, but they just do it anyways. Then on top of that, the ship has some sort of glitch. Nobody really cares. They don't check on it as far as we can tell before they go to sleep. So again, this is people acting stupid. Later on in the episode, why is it that the ship happens to crash land right in the Prodigy Corporation's city? Like, that's such a coincidence, right? It's just stupid. And then, why is the brother just a few blocks away with his team on the roof hanging out? Like, they're at the prison yard, at lunch hour. There's like working out, listening to music, joking around. And of course, the ship flies over right above their heads and just lands like a few blocks away. It's such a coincidence and so stupid. Like, first off, the fact that the ship lands so close to them is dumb. But the other thing is, who are these? The team, what are they? Are they commandos? Are they cops? Are they security guards? Are they just search and rescue? Because I don't think there'd be much to do on a day-to-day basis. And why is he a medic working with troops like that? I mean, I guess he's part of the squad, but he feels like an outsider. And then when they leave to do the search and rescue, why do they have assault rifles and like full combat gear, but not much in the way of search and rescue gear? And then when they get to the ship, they're pointing their rifles at every like literal corpse body on the ground, right? They're there to search and rescue. They should secure the site and help people. They should like check people's pulses, right? Set up IVs, get body bags out. That's search and rescue. That's what people did at 9/11. At 9/11, the cops and the fire guys weren't running in with assault rifles and grenades to like blow the place up or kill people. So it didn't really make sense. Like, I don't know what's going on here. Then once they're inside, almost at the ship, and they see the hole, they all stop and stare at the hole in the ship that they wanted to get into. Why are they staring at the hole? This is their job, to do search and rescue. They're supposed to try to get in there, and now they're on the verge of it, and they're just like staring at the hole, and they joke. Like, there should be urgency and professionalism, and they should hurry. And once they get on board the ship, they don't seem to have any sort of method, and there's no organization. Like, they should try to get into the computer to see why it crashed, and if it's going to blow up. They don't go room by room. They don't seem to go from top to bottom. They don't stay together as a team. They're like spread out. It just doesn't really make any sense what's going on, who these guys are, what their training is. And of course, all this was done just so that they could get killed. And then later on, they're probably going to be action scenes with the rifles. That's why they have the rifles. So it's very obviously set up. It's badly thought out, and it's ham-handed. But here's the thing. I know that you could take any of the examples I pointed out and justify it, right? Like you could say the reason they put up with Mr. Tang, or the reason they continue doing their mission to carry the cargo, the dangerous aliens, back to Earth, is because it's their job, right? They're given orders and they have to do it, or they lose their job and lose their money. Just like the way people today do things for Amazon or Walmart or whatever, right? They're just workers. And yes, that's true. I understand that. Some things are just the way they are, and that's the way it happens. And you can say about any of them. Like maybe the ship just happened to crash by the Prodigy City. And that's not a big deal, right? You should overlook it. It's just part of the story to get the plot going. But the problem is that you could get away with that once or maybe twice. But each of these little things where the plot is ham-handed, where it's forced, where it's illogical, where it's relying on characters acting like morons or not noticing things, that's like a little prick at the bottom, a pinprick at the bottom of like a raft, right? You're just poking holes in it one by one by one, and it's taking on more and more water. And each of these problems gets more and more irritating and impossible to ignore. So at the beginning, I was like, okay, whatever, Mr. Tang is just like that. But then by the end, I had lost all confidence in the integrity of the story and in the storytelling abilities of the writer and director. I lost faith and I was no longer going along with the ride. I was just like screaming inside at all the stupid crap happening over and over and over. And so that's why you have to clean up these things as you go. You have to make it as smooth and seamless for the viewer to just slip into the dream and watch the story unfold. The biggest moment of forced illogical plotting in this episode, and maybe the season, we'll see, is when Wendy asks the CEO to send her to do the mission. And he's like, okay. So, first, to understand why it's ridiculous, I'll just give some context. All right. So, first off, this ship that they're going to salvage or do search and rescue, for the CEO, it's a huge prize with potentially big secrets inside, right? He really wants it, you would think. It's important. So you would think he would want the best people to guarantee as much as possible a successful outcome as he could get. So that's the first big bit of context. The second is that Wendy is a kid. Right? I'm coming back to that. She's 9 years old. She has no military training, no search and rescue training. She's not even acclimated to her body. The CEO and the doctors don't know her capabilities or psychological stability. She and the other Lost Boys, the other hybrid kids, they're not trained to work together. They're not a military unit like Navy SEALs. They don't know if Wendy will follow orders. They haven't shown any way of controlling her if she goes AWOL, like flipping a switch or using some sort of special weapons to take advantage of weaknesses to neutralize her. And then they supposedly barred her from contacting her brother or getting, back with her old life from before she became a hybrid. And yet in this scene, she openly wants to do this mission to see her brother. Okay, so given all of this stuff, she just tells the guy, send me. And he's like, okay. It's so stupid, so completely unbelievable. Especially since he still has so many options, better options, that he hasn't even attempted. Like he could send a bunch of Navy SEALs, his version of Navy SEALs, or doctors, scientists, whatever. The other thing, a little more minor, is that he doesn't own the ship. So I don't get why he's doing this, why he's going in. It's a Yutani ship, and he's Prodigy. It's his company. And so just thinking logically, in a world controlled by 5 corporations, they would necessarily have extremely heavy, strict laws about corporate property ownership. So they would have laws about salvage and search and rescue, just like we do in our world. Like if an Amazon truck crashes, Microsoft doesn't send a team to go steal all the computers and underwear and washing machines from that truck, right? Like it doesn't work like that. It's just stupid. It's childish. It's silly. So that's kind of a minor thing, but still, it's just another example of things being dumb. And so the problem with all of this, of him agreeing, first off, wanting to go and take this ship, and then agreeing to send her and the Lost Boys in to do this job out of nowhere, is that they could easily get from point A to point B, meaning the ship crashing and Wendy and her team going in. They could get there with it making sense, building tension, and furthering the plot and characters. It's very doable and very easy, and yet they did it in the stupidest way possible that makes no sense. It's just forced and illogical. It's just dumb. Embedded in what I just said is a huge problem with plot that is fatal to this episode and maybe the entire season if they don't start immediately addressing it. And it connects to what I said in the last section about character, where I explained how if you unpack Wendy, you'll see that she isn't a character yet. So at base, we don't get a sense that Wendy has a true, meaningful desire or fear. And without desires or fears, I don't know her goals and the possible challenges that could come before her. And without goals and challenges, you cannot have a true storyline. Okay, plot is impossible without desires and fears or goals and challenges or obstacles. Because plot is about the desire to get something in the face of obstacles. So typically, the hero wants something and they do something to try to get it, but then the villain stops them. So then the hero tries harder and the villain pushes back even harder. And you keep going back and forth with the tension rising because now the stakes are getting larger and larger and the forces are getting stronger and stronger until you reach the climax of the story, the big battle, where the hero is either going to get everything he wants or he's going to be destroyed, right? He's going to fail spectacularly. Now, there's a lot more you could get into a plot, but that's the basic thing. That's the basic setup you need to know to understand this. And so you might think, well, in this episode, Wendy's desire, her goal is to see her brother. But the problem is we're told this. We don't know her because she was never set up before she became a hybrid. And we don't know him either. We haven't seen them together. We don't know their relationship. We don't sense their need to be together as brother and sister. And we don't want them to reunite. We don't feel how badly she needs it, right? How badly she needs him and he needs her to be happy or healthy or whatever. So there's no real stakes. And if, from our perspective, if she never sees him again in her life, who cares? We don't care. And we can't even imagine what would happen to her because we don't know how badly she needs him. So we can't see how badly she would collapse if she doesn't get to be with him. So she doesn't particularly need him from her own perspective or from our perspective, from what we've seen. Then there is no real character and there's no possibility for plot. We're just told she wants to see him. She asked the CEO to go see him. And he immediately says yes. Okay, and the problem with that is that there were zero obstacles for her. All she had to do was ask, and he says, sure, go, in this episode. So this episode had zero plot. Okay, earlier I said this episode had zero character, and now we're seeing that this episode also had zero plot. This is fatal. This is deadly. This is the equivalent of a plane going 200 miles per hour on the runway and the pilot refusing to pull up to go airborne. Right? So this is really, really bad. And I'm going to be watching out for this because I need to fix this quick, as in the next episode, or else they really don't have a season of actual real story of television, right? This isn't drama. It's just stuff happening. You know, characters are running around, characters are becoming hybrids, aliens are running around the ship screaming, people die. It's just stuff being thrown around, but it's not a storyline. It's not a plot. It's not characters. This isn't drama. Now, a separate issue I want to briefly talk about, only just for fun, is that to me, this show almost invalidates the first movie, Alien, because it makes Yutani look stupid. And by stupid, I don't just mean it makes them look murderous because it's fine for a corporation to prize profits over human life in a story. But I mean, it makes them look stupid even at achieving their own sinister goals. Because now we know that Yutani knows almost everything we know about the alien organism and its life cycle before the show even starts. And in fact, they know more because they seem to know locations of creatures we haven't seen before. And they also know how unbelievably dangerous the xenomorphs are. And so then that begs the question, why does everything in the first act of the first Alien movie happen as it did? Because now in retrospect, it doesn't really make sense. Did Yutani know about the distress beacon in the first movie and the crashed engineer ship with the eggs? Now, the answer doesn't really matter because there's still a contradiction. And so the central question is, if they know about the aliens and how dangerous they are, why didn't they take more precautions to ensure the alien made it back to Earth at the end of the first movie? They already saw the Maginot eviscerated in space. So it's logical to expect the Nostromo from part one and its crew to get equally wrecked. And so they could logically assume, well, this ship is probably not going to make it back to Earth. So instead, what the company would have done in retrospect is they should have either sent a better team and ship to answer the distress signal and go on that planet if they knew about the planet and the signal. Or they should have had Ash, the synthetic in that movie, kill everyone once they came back with the facehugger, and then lock that guy with the facehugger in the airlock, or put him in hypersleep to ensure that the specimen is kept alive and contained, right, to get it back to Earth. That's what would have made sense. And so now in retrospect, the first movie doesn't really make any sense. Maybe they'll answer these contradictions. I hope they do. But it's just a bit annoying that they needlessly created continuity issues. I mean, why not just set the show after part 2 or something, right? It's like needless. But anyways, maybe they'll fix it. To recap everything I've just said about the problems with the show in basically one sentence, the main problems with the show, aside from tone, which I won't talk about anymore since the solution is obvious, just be more creative and true to the Aliens franchise, is that this episode, 1, has no characters, and 2, no plot. Instead, it does has a lot of stuff happening to create the illusion of a show, but it's hollow at its core. So now let's get to the solutions. When I'm revising or when I'm brainstorming, I like to start with the characters. Because once you start filling out the characters with a personality, with desires, and with fears, you'll find that characters start to have opposing desires and opposing fears. And that creates conflict between the characters. And once you have conflict between the characters, you have plot. So in other words, if you fix the characters, you're going to end up fixing a lot of the script. Everything else is going to start falling into place and building up in a way that makes sense, in a way that's dramatic and riveting and interesting. And so how would I start with these characters, fixing them? Well, first, the most obvious thing is just not making them kids. But earlier I said I want to fix the story in a way that stays true to the vision of the writer and director. And I can tell that this writer, Noah Hawley, I think his name is, the director too, same guy, he wants the main characters to be naive and innocent and impressionable for some reason. It's not clear why yet. Hopefully that'll develop and we'll know why. But how would you make these characters kind of like naive and inexperienced, but also not be kids? And the answer is pretty obvious. All you got to do is bump the age of the kids, their psychological age of the hybrids, up. So instead of being like 9 years old or 12 years old, they could probably be like 16, around 16. You could bump that age up even more, a wider range. So you could say like 15 to 20 potentially. And if they're in that range, then they're not just like kids. You open up the story so much more in terms of what you could do with them. in their internal richness and the things they could deal with. Like right now, Wendy being 9 years old, you can't do a love story with her because she's 9. It'd be disgusting. And 9-year-old kids don't really fall in love. They have like little crushes, but it's not true love. So a romantic story is like impossible for those kids, right? And so if you just make them a little bit older in their late teens, maybe 20 at most, you could do a romantic story if you want. You could do everything. They could deal with death, with fear, terror, love, and so on. So it's much richer. And there's no downside to doing this, right? You're not missing out on anything that just having 9-year-old kids would otherwise give you. So I would say if these guys were coming to me as a script doctor, I would tell them, you gotta, this is basically non-negotiable. You can't debate it. Just do it. There's no reason not to do it, and there's every reason to make this change. It'll make everything better. The second obvious change to fix the characters in this is to set a baseline for Wendy and her buddies. Because the problem right now is that she's supposed to be this little girl who becomes a hybrid, right? And she even says in the script, I'm human. But to us, from what we see, she's not human. We barely saw her as a girl for just like 2 or 3 minutes. So she's just like a little robot girl, basically. And you don't want that. You want her to be a human girl who became a hybrid, so that you could appreciate where she starts, where she comes from, and how she changes as she gets into this hybrid body, and then how she develops more as she confronts the horror, the terror of the alien menace. Okay, so you need that starting position. And so then the way you do that is pretty simple. All you got to do is bump up the point, or point back, move it back, the point at which she changes bodies. So instead of changing her at like 3 minutes into the story or 5 minutes or whatever it is from when we first meet her, make her change at the end, the very end of episode 1, or maybe in episode 2 even, at some point in episode 2. All right. So what that does is it gives you time. It gives you a whole episode or more to get to know Wendy, the girl, what she was like beforehand. Now that we've pushed Wendy's age and transformation back, we have the room to build a sturdy, interesting character that could support not just an episode, but a whole season of television. Right? You could build it all around her. It's like when you're building a house on a plot of land. You first have to clear the land to have a pad, and then you can build a foundation and all the rest, right? You build a house on top of that. So you need that good foundation. So now that's what we're going to do. We have the space for that. And so how do you actually start? Well, when I'm coming up with characters, what I like to do is start with the character arc. And the character arc is just the journey, the interior journey that the character takes from the start of the story to the end of the story. Those positions at the start and at the end are what they stand for or what they exemplify. So you can go from, let's say, distrustful to trusting. You could go from hateful to loving. In a movie, and it could be more complex than that. So like take Groundhog Day, Bill Murray's character. At the start of the movie, he's cynical, self-hating or self-loathing, and he's lonely, right? And all those work together because he's cynical and self-loathing, he's lonely, and so on. But in the course of the film, through the adventure, he learns to be open, loving, and happy. So all those qualities, at the start and at the end, they were working together and moved in the same direction. And they overall moved from a negative point to a positive point. Here's the thing, though, with character arcs. We're dealing with drama. And so what you want to do is you want to be as big and dramatic as possible. You want the most feeling, the most excitement. So in general, you don't want a character who's kind of unhappy at the start of the movie and then ending kind of happy, right? You don't want to start with a hero who sort of wants to stop the bad guy, whatever. And at the end, he like sort of beats the bad guy. Not really. He doesn't really care. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? What you want to do is go as big a journey, as big an arc as possible with as much movement as possible. So you want to go like 180 degrees wherever you start. you want to go to the opposite. So you'll start at A and you end at negative A, not A, right? Or you could start at negative A and end at A. So if they start happy, they could end miserable. Or if they start miserable, they could go happy. Now, of course, there's more complexity to it than that, because you could have like ironic character arcs where, let's say, the character starts poor, impoverished in terms of money, and they're miserable, right? They want to get rich, they want to make money. But then at the end of the movie, they could still be poor, but because of what happened in the movie, they realize money doesn't really matter, and so now they're happy. So the character arc thing still holds because they went from miserable to happy, even though they stayed poor. So now what we have to do is come up with Wendy's character arc. And so what you do is just think, given what we've had, since I'm fixing the script, I'm not coming up with something from scratch necessarily. With what's already here with her at the start, the very start, how can we build her out with a good character arc? What's her initial starting position, right? That's where we begin this. And so when I look at her, she's a young woman, because I'm bumping up the age, but she's a teenage girl who's physically sick and on the verge of dying, right? She's very weak. So that's like a key word I would put down if I were brainstorming. Weak mentally and physically. Physically because she's sick, but mentally, due to that sickness, she's afraid. She's afraid of dying. And because she's so weak, she would also be probably, not necessarily, but I'm thinking probably shy, let's say, right? Because she's weaker than everybody else around her. All the adults and the normal kids her age, or normal teens her age, are stronger than her and more confident because they know they're going to live and they could do stuff. And she can't do that. So she's shy, she's weak, she's afraid, she's insecure, and she's also probably meek around others. That's what I saw in like that 1 minute we saw that character at the very beginning. So I think that's where we're going to start. And from there, to come up with some more ideas, we could think of other starting positions, other qualities in her that would cause chaos with the rest of the characters or the world around her. Because you want to cause chaos. Chaos creates conflict, and conflict gives you plot points, and thus you have story. So other things that work with weak, afraid, shy, meek, and so on, I would also say maybe she's afraid to confront authority. Like she has all these doctors, they're always telling her what treatments to do. They're telling her what's going to happen to her body and what they're going to do, how they're going to experiment with her. So I would say she's afraid to confront authority. She listens and lets them do what they want to do with her body, with her. Another thing I might put in there would be like, because she lives in this she is basically owned by this mega corporation, Prodigy. And this is a world that's built around human profit. Profit at all costs, at the cost of human life. Maybe she's generous. So she's the opposite of the corporation that owns her. And she's the opposite of most humans in this world, right? She's generous. She's helpful. She's not about making money. And so if she's afraid to confront authority, that would create conflict for her, because you can imagine in the course of the story, the CEO is going to tell her to do things that's basically suicidal or dangerous to her and her friends. And so she's going to have to learn to confront authority, to stand up for herself, to save her friends, to defeat the aliens, even though these corporations want to keep and use these aliens. She's going to probably want to annihilate them to save humanity. So her being afraid to confront authority creates a lot of conflict and possible plot points already, we can say. And her being generous also would create conflict because she's at odds with the mega corporation, right? She doesn't care about profit, as I kind of hinted at. And she's going to be willing to make sacrifices from the point of view of the corporation to save her friends. She's not willing to sacrifice them so they can make money, the corporation. So now we have a bunch of qualities for her at the start: being weak, afraid, shy, meek, afraid to confront authority, and being unusually generous. So it's a good place to start for her. It gives her a big arc to move in terms of the opposites. Because now you just say, okay, where does she go from there? Well, if she starts weak, by the end of the season, 8 episodes or 7 episodes for now, she's going to be strong, right? Not just physically with the body, although that's certainly there as she learns to use her body and use her abilities, but she's going to be mentally strong. She'll now believe in her own powers. She'll have self belief that she's worthy, that she's a human being, she's worthy of life, and she's not a toy for the corporation to use. So now she's also no longer afraid. She's confident. She's not shy anymore. She stands up for herself, right? And she's not meek. So this is how you create an arc for the character. And I think probably you guys could already get a feel for how the storyline would work in my mind if I were doing this. So now that we have the character arc, the starting position, and a basic idea of the ending position for Wendy, how do you build an actual script out of that, right? Because we don't have any scenes or anything like that. So what you do is you take these positions and you look forward to the next big plot point for the character, right? What's the big thing that's going to happen to her? And the next big thing for her, obviously, is the operation to become a hybrid. So what we want to think of are concrete scenes, dramatic scenes that would show those initial starting positions, like she's weak and afraid and all that. That would also lead towards that big plot point. And so in thinking it over, I had a few ideas. So let's say the first time we see her is a shuttle comes to that research facility and she gets out, walks out of the airlock, and it's her and the mentor arriving for the first time, right? She just arrived, and this is the first time we've seen her. And the CEO is standing there greeting her. He thanks her for coming, and he explains the procedure she's going to undergo using like sciencey kind of words the audience will understand, but maybe a teenager might not completely get. At the end of this thing, explaining what's going to happen to her, he asks if she has any questions, and she doesn't even look at him. She just shakes her head no. So he turns and leaves. And as soon as she's gone, she turns to the mentor, to the synth or the psychologist, and she like tugs their arm, and she says, "What did he mean by all that?" So, I mean, there would be more to the scene than just that. But these little bits that I showed right there that I explained, you get a lot of information about her. You'd see that she's shy and that she's afraid of authority. And depending on how she treats the synth, maybe it shows that she doesn't really even respect the synth, which would be kind of interesting for the course of the show because she becomes a hybrid, but she thinks synths are lower than her. So maybe she bosses the synth around. And so that's a lot of information in just a scene that could be like 1 or 2 minutes right there. Another virtue of the scene that I just described is that it does a lot of work. It explains the whole setup of hybrids and of the scientific process, the medical process she's going to undergo. And also it explains her physicality, like why and how she's so weak. It introduces Wendy in general and her character. It introduces the CEO, and it introduces the synth. So it's a lot of characters, a lot of things being set up there for the audience. And in thinking back, actually, I would probably add a little more. I would make it really dramatic when she comes out of the shuttle. So when she comes out, she wouldn't just like walk out. I would put her maybe in a wheelchair with like IVs connected to her, breathing machine. Just make it shocking how sick and bad she is. Okay, because like I said, you want the arc to be as dramatic as possible. So she should be like really bad at the start physically, and then of course we'll see how that changes as it goes on. A key thing to remember about character or setting up characters is that their most important scene, I think, is their first scene. Because that's the first introduction to the character for the audience. And so just having characters do like a normal stupid thing the first time you see them, like just say hi to somebody or just pick up the phone and say hello, or if they come out of their house to go to work and just like wave at their neighbor, that doesn't give you information about that character. It should be like almost an iconic moment. Like just that one scene would tell you a lot about that character at that starting position. And so the scene that I gave, it's not perfect at all. but I think it's getting there. Like let's say she's coming out on the wheelchair with the synth pushing her, and then there's like stairs to go up out of the airlock. And so the synth is going to like lift her up, but she says no. Instead, she stands up on her own power. And with great difficulty and pain, she tries to climb the stairs to get up alone, just to save the time so they don't have to like work with all their machines all awkwardly and carried up the stairs. It's not perfect, but it would kind of show like, wow, this girl has mental strength. She's pushing through the pain to get into this research facility. So we see how badly she wants to live and how badly she wants this treatment. All right. So I think this scene kind of does a good amount of work. The only thing I would add to this scene to make it better, to fill it out, is conflict. Now, we already have some conflict, but it's physical conflict with her going through the pain to move. But I would add probably some emotional conflict, psychological conflict. And I think a good way to do that would be to have the CEO announce to her for the first time that now that she's entering the facility, she can never talk to her brother or anyone from her old life again. And so this would come as a shock to her. And because she's meek, she's quiet, she's kind of weak, she's not going to fight back or say anything. She's all this, the pressure is building up in her. She hears this. And only once the CEO leaves would she maybe cry or show some emotion, maybe to the synth. Now, that's just one scene. So what would you do to fill out the rest, right? How would you write the rest of the script? Well, remember, we're still going to have the ship stuff, the other plot line in the storyline. So it's not like we have to fill 60 minutes of just Wendy. It's a lot less than that, maybe half or even less. But we still need more scenes, obviously, to build this out. So let's say the CEO explains that Wendy isn't guaranteed to undergo the procedure like she is currently in this episode. Instead, he explains that they have a bunch of kids coming in, and they're only going to choose the best, the toughest kids who could handle the process, because this experimental procedure is so tough on the human body and on the human mind that it has a really high failure rate. Okay, so they're going to weed out the kids. They have to prove themselves, and it's a grueling selection process. So they're going to undergo a battery of tests. And so we can have a few tests in scene. We can show Wendy and the other kids undergoing these tests or these processes, these examinations. So let's say they have like a math test or a logic test, and this would be like a quick scene, not much dialogue. And she's doing better than the kid next to her. And because earlier she knows that the kid is really sick and he wants to get out, like they would have had a scene earlier explaining that. So she would let him cheat. She would let him see her answers to help him out because she's nice, right? We explained that already. She's generous. She lets the kid cheat. And then let's say it turns out that the CEO is watching on the monitor or the security people or whatever, and they know that she's letting the kid cheat. She's breaking the rules. So they tell her, don't do that. Okay, because if you help the other kids, they're going to get ahead of the line of you, right? You want to weed the others out, and they're going to take advantage of you. But then in the next test, just like a second later, she still helps kids out. Okay, so this is telling us how generous she is. All right, and so the other kids maybe start to like her. Then let's say they do a physical test where they have to do a run, and she's not allowed to use the wheelchair. Nobody is allowed to use anything physical. So she's doing it on her own power, this run or a wall climb or whatever it is that's physical. She's really struggling. You could tell she's pushing herself. She's on the verge of passing out. She's in excruciating pain. Like her vision is flaring out. She's going to pass out. And then she actually collapses and does pass out, right? The audience doesn't expect it. They think she's going to do it, but she does pass out. And then that kid that she helped cheat earlier picks her up and takes her to the end. He helps her against the rules as well. So now we have a relationship. And just like a quick montage, it could just be like a minute or 2 minutes, or it could be longer if you want. But it's fairly quick, not a lot of dialogue or special effects or anything. But you already have a friendship with these kids, and you have kind of the beginning of them starting to act up against the corporation to show their own willpower. They're breaking the rules. And so, just with this little bit of stuff that I've explained here, I think we've done a lot more work than the current script. Because right now we don't know the kids. There's no relationship. We don't know Wendy. We don't have their initial positions, and so we're kind of getting that slowly. We also get a sense that even though she's painfully shy and weak, the other kids are starting to like her and respect her because we see them helping her. But more than that, they're copying her. They're starting to break the rules, just like her. And so she's becoming the leader of the group naturally. And that's how eventually she becomes the future leader of this hybrid special forces squad. Instead of just throwing that role on the character because the script demands it. Right? In the script right now, she's the leader because supposedly she's mentoring the kids because she was the first to undergo the operation. But in terms of screen time, she had the operation like literally 20 or 30 seconds before they did. So there's no reason for her to be the leader and like make decisions and the kids to follow her. So now I'm trying to change that slowly so that it makes sense that yes, she's naturally coming into that leadership position. She's filling that role. That's where she belongs. The other big thing I'd want to do with Wendy is to have her see a bunch of her friends and the kids that we see her doing tests with and getting to know and so on, being chosen for the hybridization process before her because they're more physically fit and tougher supposedly, and failing at the process. Okay, so in other words, she goes and walks with them to the operation to support them, and she waits outside the operating room for them to come out, but they never do because they die. Like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of her friends die on the table because this process is so dangerous and so demanding and so experimental that it's just never worked before. There's never been a successful operation before. Now, I'd have her, of course, be really sad, devastated because she's losing friends. But she would put on a brave face in front of her friends and tell them, there's hope. Don't give up. Try really hard. We're going to be okay. We're going to heal. We're going to overcome this sickness. She would tell that to her friends in public. But then I would show her like in her room or in her bunk or whatever, crying at night because she's sad for the kids and for herself. She's scared. So you would see into her mind a little bit there that she's trying to help people. She's trying to be brave, but she's secretly vulnerable. Right. And then I would have the CEO or the doctors come up to her and tell her they're sorry, that the technology is just not working. They're canceling the program and they're putting her back in a regular hospital to do chemotherapy again or whatever. And so this was just devastating, right? Because all hope is gone. She's probably going to die in like a month or whatever because she's getting even more and more and more sick as this episode is going on. She's getting weaker and weaker. So now she has no hope. Her life is over. She's devastated. And I would have her go to the CEO, like run to his room or whatever she could do physically to get to him, something dramatic, to get his attention. And she would like beg him, crying, pulling his leg, his clothes, whatever, begging him to do it anyways. That she knows the risks and she wants to try it anyways because it's better than the alternative of dying in chemo in like a month or whatever. And he would look at her and say, no, it's a waste of money, a waste of resources. It's her time to die. Now, you're thinking, well, she's got to become the hybrid, right? How is that going to happen? Well, I'll explain that in a sec. I'll get to that. There's another key aspect of Wendy that I haven't dealt with yet that intersects with another key character, maybe the second most important character of the whole season, and that is her brother. And the reason he's important is because as it stands in the episode right now, he's Wendy's only goal. All she wants, as far as we know, is to see him and talk to him and reunite with him. She's extremely invested in him, or at least she should be. I don't actually feel that. I know it intellectually that that's what the writer wants us to think. So if he's that important to Wendy, the main character, that means he's important to the show and that he's going to factor into the season in a big way. And so we need to develop him and their relationship so that we feel it as an audience. And so we get that baseline, that starting position in the arc of the characters and the arc of the plot line. so we could appreciate how things change and how the plot moves. So, how do you develop him in the relationship? Well, first, show him more on screen. Right now, he's only there like a mannequin. He's just a dude who's a medic and he's like walking around. And that's really it. We don't know any of his personality. We don't even know what he thinks of her. Okay, so this is a terrible setup for him in the show. Second, to develop the relationship, the way you develop a relationship is to show the relationship on screen, right? Don't imply it and don't assume that the audience knows it or will just like figure it out that, oh yeah, they're brother and sister, so they have to love each other. Because that's not the case. There are plenty of brothers and sisters that don't care about each other, right? They don't give a shit. So we need to see them talk. And it shouldn't be in the past. It should be in the present. Now, why do I say it should be in the present? Well, whenever I watch shows and they do big flashbacks, I always wonder if what happened in the past is so damn important. Why not set this whole movie in the past when that flashback happened? All right, so yeah, maybe in theory you could do the occasional flashback, but the problem is if you do too many flashbacks, then you should have set the story in the past in the first place, because that's where the good stuff and important stuff is, supposedly, you're telling us, because you keep going back there. And if you only do one or two flashbacks, then they're awkward and they break the movement in time of the story, right? They shatter the dream. We have to go back and it ruins things. And it seems lazy that you didn't find a way to do things without the flashback. Flashbacks are usually just exposition. And exposition is bad. It's just boring. And so what you need to do is find a way to dramatize whatever that flashback is communicating, that material, dramatize it in the present. At first glance, it might seem that I set up an impossible conundrum, because how could she talk to him before they meet at ground zero, where the ship crashes, if she's not allowed to talk to him? And how could she talk to him without revealing the secret of her hybrid program? Well, the solution is actually easy. If she's not allowed to talk to him by the company, then that means she needs to sneak communication somehow. And if the program is a secret and nobody outside of it can know about it, then how about she doesn't actually know the full implications of the program? In other words, she thinks she's there for a experimental high-tech treatment, a miracle cure, but she doesn't actually know she's going to change bodies yet. That's kept secret from her. So that when she does talk to her brother, she has nothing to tell him about. She's not going to reveal the secret, right? So if you take those two approaches, you're really dealing with the problem pretty easily. And now you're able to show a relationship on screen between them, instead of just implying it or ignoring it and having them both be kind of empty mannequins with no relationship between them that we feel tangibly. To translate this into actual scenes and to make an actual script with this new concept, I would take a step back and imply the relationship with her brother, because I don't want the first time we know about her brother is the first time she just talks about him, right? You want to know that she wants to see him, that she really wants to see him. That's all she wants. She's desperate to see him. She's waiting. She needs to see him or talk to him. And then finally you get that payoff when she talks to him, right? So how do you imply that relationship and get that buildup without him actually being there yet? And so what I would use is something in the episode that we saw where she has like teddy bears. And so why not just give her, instead of a bunch of teddy bears, just one teddy bear? And the brother gave it to her right before she came over. Or maybe, years ago from her childhood. And then whenever, as I mentioned earlier, she's like crying in her bunker in her room because her friends are dying or because she's having a hard time with the training and her body's weak and so on, she would sit in bed and hug the teddy bear and talk to it as though it were her brother. And then maybe you could have the mentor walk in and see her hugging it. And he would say, I've never understood why children hold teddy bears. Why do you have that? What does it do? And she would explain simply, my brother gave it to me. And so that would make things, that would like give you that moment of, okay, recognition, that now you know why she has that teddy bear, why it's so special to her, why she talks to it, what it means to her. And you know about her brother, that she misses him. And that's like her anchor point emotionally. Also, it will give you insight into the mentor, into the synth, and show that he's like innocent and naive. He's kind of uncanny. He's not human, but he's still curious, right? So you're developing multiple characters, getting multiple things going here in a very simple scene with just a teddy bear and crying, building on the other stuff we said about like her friends dying and so on. Now we're set up for Wendy and her brother to actually talk to each other fairly early on in this season before the crash. And so, how do you do that? Well, the easiest way for her to talk to him against the rules is to sneak away past the rules. And I would probably use just a terminal, computer terminal. And so, an obvious option that I saw from the episode, watching the episode, is when she goes in to talk to the psychiatrist for like an update and to see how her progress is going, and if she's to see if she's ready for the surgery. I would have the psychiatrist call the medical office and request medical records, whatever, to see her dopamine levels and so on, to see how she's doing. And Wendy would notice that and realize, and we know what she's thinking, but she would think, okay, the psychiatrist has unrestricted access on that terminal to call the medical office, which is where my brother works. Okay, so now that's her pathway to talk to the brother. Then at some point, it could be in this scene or maybe in the next scene, while they're in a meeting, Wendy and the psychiatrist gets called out and she leaves the office or goes out of the room. And Wendy's just like staring at that terminal because we know she wants to get on it and call her brother. So finally, she gets up and sneaks her way, and she's like 6, so she's like all slow, desperately trying to get over there. And so it could be a moment of tension because there's like armed guards all over the base that we've seen so far. So like the stakes are kind of higher. And plus, she's been told that if she breaks the rules, she's going to be kicked out of the program. And yet she's still trying to reach her brother. So that tells us even more how much she wants to see him. She's willing to risk that. And she finally gets the terminal. She tries to figure out how to use it. She calls the medical office, gets the directory for her brother, and like the phone is ringing or it's connecting. The connection is going through. And then this time, there would be footsteps coming towards her, and so she has to shut it off. So you have that build up, that expectation, and then it's shut off. The second time, I would let her get through, and that's when they talk. And so, hopefully the characters would have the actors would have some chemistry together, and the script would be good, of course, as good as possible, so that even with just like a few minutes of conversation through the screen, or maybe a few separate quick scenes showing them talking to each other, if this goes on for a little bit, we get a sense of their relationship, maybe how they joke with each other, they relate to each other, and they're likable, right? We like these two characters and we can see how they feed off each other. And so he would pep her up. He keeps her spirits high through that process because as far as he knows and as far as she knows, she's just getting a cure at a hospital. So he's really talking her through it. He tells her to be strong and to listen to the doctors, which would be ironic because they're, kind of evil. But this is how you get them talking to each other early on. And we see now how much she needs him and how well they get along together, so that when she does change bodies and she's no longer allowed to contact him ever again, we have something to understand how that crushes her, how that breaks her, and how much she needs him anyways, and how she's going to be willing to do anything to get back in touch with him. After that first conversation with Wendy and her brother, I'd actually like to change point of views to the brother, to leave that research center and go to him and follow him for 2 reasons. One is just to develop him a little more, because remember, he's probably the second most important character of the show. And so he needs to also have a personality and goals and fears to set him up as a good character, a rounded character. The second reason I like to do that, and it works in conjunction with that, is to place little time bombs inside his character that we know are going to create huge conflict between him and his sister, him and the corporation, and him possibly with the aliens. So basically, we're setting up a juicy story here, really just pumping it full of steroids to keep the season going, to keep the show going all through the season, and to make the season just really awesome. So how would I do this? I would start by showing him in a medical lab. All right, it's his lab, because now he's not just a little medic. He can still do medical stuff. He's like a doctor, but he's also a researcher, and he's at the head of a team. He would be working, bossing these people around. Everyone listens and respects him. This is just really brief. That's just the first few seconds. And then a guard would come in, an intimidating looking guard, and summon him. And the guard takes them, just breezes them through all kinds of security. And people kind of show respect to him, like maybe salute him or something as he goes. So we know he's big. He gets on an elevator and he goes to the top of the skyscraper, all the way to the top. And he meets the CEO. And as soon as he walks in the office of the CEO stands up, congratulates him because the brother, his work the last year, made the company trillions of dollars because of some drugs or whatever medical stuff that he did. And so they're going to give him a big bonus for meeting quarterly expectations or exceeding them. And they're also offering him something special. And so the offer is they want to get him out of doing normal medical research and to go to the next level, to go to the future, and to be transferred to the new department to work on cyborgs and synths and hybrids, since they've been notoriously difficult to control and develop, and they've been unreliable. And with this new job offer, he's being offered huge new salary, like several times what he makes already. He'll be given a new apartment at the top level of the city, the skyscraper, so real fancy. He'll get a private shuttle to commute to work, and so on. So he has this amazing deal. And he just says no. And the CEO asks, well, why not? Surprised. And so the brother says he hates artificial life and he will only work on humans, for humans, and with humans. And so, of course, the CEO says, well, maybe he's working for the wrong company because they specialize in artificial life, or that's the direction they're going now. And he says, no, he loves the company. He loves Prodigy because he grew up on a Prodigy colony or the Prodigy city. And they gave him everything. They saved him and his sister because maybe they're orphans or something or poor. And so he only sees himself as a Prodigy man for the rest of his life. He's devoted to the company. But he'd prefer to work where he is now, as long as he has a choice, because of what he already said, and also because, as he justifies it to the CEO, he's making great progress where he is and will continue to do so. And he hopes to double all the money that he made the company next year. And so the CEO takes a moment and thanks, and he says, of course. And he lets him leave. But we can see in his face and in his eyes that he's clearly disappointed. And he has undisclosed, sinister, and secret plans for the brother. And so notice how much that one little scene, maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes, gave us. Right? Number one, we know that he's a great scientist, great researcher, and medical professional. So we know he's capable of great things, and it would make sense to have him work on cyborg synths, hybrids, and the xenomorphs, and on other cutting-edge tech. Instead of right now, the brother's like a medic. So all he could do is, he takes people's pulses and sticks thermometers up their ass. That doesn't give you a lot to work with story-wise. He's just a dude scared of the aliens, basically, with no skills. Number two, it puts him on a much higher level than the sister in terms of their power and their social status. And so that creates contrast because she's going to be like a slave, basically, or an indentured servant. And he's one of those powerful guys, at least in this division of the company that they both work for. Three, it shows he's a company man. He's pro corporate. So he actually likes and helps this kind of carnivorous, never ending corporate power structure. He's right in there. He likes it. And so this could put him at odds with Wendy if she grows anti corporate, which is what we kind of set up with her being generous and not caring about money, right? She values human life. This guy values profits. That's how he measures the worth of people and things, how much money they can make. Fourth and most obviously, it shows that he hates synthetic life. And so this clearly puts him on a collision course with Wendy, because at some point he's going to discover what she's become. And it would disgust him. It would make him unable to take her back in, to accept her, to work with her. Maybe he would even want to destroy her. And once she sees his reaction to her, that would shatter her, because she's been wanting to see him. This is the person she loves and looks up to and worships and whatever, however you set that up. But now she's crushed, and her only dream, her only goal has been shattered. And as far as it seems to her at the time, her world is over. There's an interesting repercussion here, or a potential option you could work out of this. And that is that if the CEO knows that Wendy wants to see the brother, what if he actually lies to her and tells her that if she follows orders, if she's a good girl or a good robot, and she does this mission that he's going to set her on to do with the ship and the aliens and so on, if she's good at that, then he's going to let her live with her brother free. He's going to give her freedom. Now, of course, he's lying. He doesn't mean to do that. But see, now what happens is, if the brother is disgusted by her and she realizes it, and the relationship is shattered and she's shattered, then suddenly the company and the CEO no longer have that hanging over her, because she doesn't care about the brother now. As far as she's concerned, that option is gone. And so now the CEO no longer has that control switch, that kind of bribe hanging over her, that he's going to give her freedom to go with the brother. And so she can become, theoretically, a loose cannon. She could do whatever she wants at that point, including attack the company and the CEO. That's how I would approach fixing the characters in this script and setting up for the season. Because I feel like the result now is that these characters feel more like real people, like they're making decisions, and like the plot isn't acting on them. They're forming the plot based on their needs, their dreams, their fears. And so just through some basic character work at the start with brainstorming, really, I hope you'll agree that I've given this more believable, interesting, fun possibilities, more sources of tension and conflict that form plot lines that could carry the story throughout the season. And I think probably multiple seasons. I think there's a lot of material to work with here, thematically and character wise. Instead, in its current form, in this first episode, there's no real hint for me of where the story can go with the characters. And so it makes everything just kind of boring. So it's like stuff moving around. There's nothing. I have no need to see the second episode, although I will. Now I'm going to move on to plot. I've already covered a lot of the plot, especially with Wendy, but I still haven't covered the spaceship and the crash. And so I'll just go over how I would have handled that better. The most obvious plot change I would make has to do with the spaceship, and that is give us more of the spaceship. Because the people who are watching the show, Alien Earth, obviously like Alien and Aliens, those two movies, right? It's an inbuilt fan group. And so what you do when you have a group like that is you give them what they want, what they came for, or they're going to be pissed off. So give them Alien and Aliens right up front. So if Wendy, the stuff that I've talked about Wendy would probably take at least 30 minutes. And this episode is like a little more than an hour. So then the spaceship stuff should take about 30 minutes. Don't do these little cutscenes and little teasers that they did, where they show like 1 minute on the spaceship here and like 2 minutes there. And then there's like these little freaky flashbacks with people dying. Just give us a story, like a mini movie on the ship, showing us what happened, what went wrong. Give us the action, show them dying. And you might think, well, this is the first episode. You can't do that. You have to hide the aliens. You have to hide the bad guy because you try to hide it for as long as possible to build that setup. And then at the end, finally, you get what you want. Well, usually that's true in movies. And that's true in the original Alien movie, where you don't even see the creature for a long time. But that doesn't apply here because we all already know the alien. And the alien doesn't change. It's always the same. All it is just a murderous beast from our nightmares. And so I know the show is trying to be sneaky by adding new creatures like that eyeball spider and the centipede that like sucks the blood and then turns into this big ball and like rolls off the body. But that stuff's irrelevant and stupid. It doesn't matter if the creature has 2 legs or 4 legs or 8 legs or no eyes or 10 eyes or wings. It's just a killing machine we're supposed to find scary. So that's why those movies that Ridley Scott did recently, Covenant and Prometheus, were just so stupid because he was trying to be clever and change the alien creature to give it like a pointy head, or it has black goo and that kind of stuff. Like, that's moronic. Playing with those physical characteristics doesn't matter. The essence of all those creatures is the same. They're just killing machines. So in this episode, I would just open up, give us a good little mini alien movie on the ship. Don't just copy part 1 and 2, of course, and I'll go over what I would do. But give us that action and that tension, and then the disaster striking. And that would set up a good, that would kind of foreshadow the threat to humanity when you see what happens on that ship. And so once you see what happens there, you think, oh man, Earth is in trouble. And so it's not so much in trouble from the alien. The true enemy that we're teasing, that we're foreshadowing, isn't the alien, but the humans, the companies, and the artificial humanoids. Because in the Alien franchise, I mean, the whole theme of the franchise is the greatest evil in the universe and the biggest danger to humanity isn't extraterrestrials or giant insects, right? It's human beings ourselves, and the things we create. And so what would happen on the ship to allow the alien outbreak and then to destroy the ship and make it crash? It's not just that aliens are running around killing people. It's that human failings, human greed, human secrecy, and human trickery are what lead to the outbreak and the destruction on the ship. And so that's the danger to Earth once the ship crashes. Because the aliens don't follow our economic, political, and diplomatic rules, which usually allow the powerful in this country to get away with being greedy or exercising their power over others or being violent and so on. And so they expose the danger of our own nature against ourselves. So when the ship crashes, it promises that all the rules on Earth, an Earth rigidly controlled by corporations, are about to fall apart. So that's my big theory, my big approach on how to handle aliens versus human civilization now that they're threatening Earth instead of just being on a ship like in part 1 or in a remote colony like in part 2. And so I'm going to zoom in into the actual plotting of the ship and how to handle it. I would start with something that interested me in the actual episode that was kind of briefly mentioned. And they didn't really do anything with it, but I'm going to expand that out and tease that out to make a whole sequence. And so there's a few parts to it. One, the crew knows the nature of the aliens when they wake up, right? They already fought and died against them. And second, some of them are uncomfortable with the idea of having them on the ship as cargo. And so what I would do is go to the next logical stage. And instead of having the crew just like sit around and or go to sleep into hypersleep until the end of the episode where we just see the ship like crashing out of control, I would have the crew stage a mutiny to try to destroy the aliens. And that's the core of what happens in this episode on the ship. Here is how I'd handle it in a little more detail. And it starts just like it does in the episode that we saw. So they wake up, but this time they're only a week from Earth. And the ship is on final approach to the planet. So you could kind of see Earth as a small blue ball out there in space. But this time, as they get out of bed, out of the hypersleep, we see that they're bandaged up and in serious trouble. One has lost maybe an arm, another has like acid splashed on the face, and they've lost an eye. And we know just visually right away, these people faced hell. They fought the aliens and they barely survived. And now they need desperate medical attention. And instead of 12 crew or whatever it was waking up, because there was a ton of people on the ship in the episode we saw, maybe there's only like 5. And so as they get out of bed and sit up, we see there's a ton of empty sleeping berths and like lockers that nobody's using. So we know most of the crew is dead. And as they get out of bed and start like getting ready and waking up, they're kind of groggy, but one might shake a lot. And another is constantly crying and rocking because they have extreme PTSD. And maybe one just like sits and stares out the window at Earth getting bigger, and they just want to get off the ship as soon as possible and retire after what they faced. And so from the dialogue, we learn that the captain, and in the episode that we saw right now, the captain was barely present. I think he said like 2 lines. So at first I didn't even realize he was the captain until I went back and looked at that scene again. But we learned that the captain ordered the mission to be scrapped because they were being annihilated. And so they actually left without getting the cargo. They don't have the aliens. And they say they're really surprised that Yutani allowed them to leave because Yutani doesn't usually let people cancel a mission on their own. But then, of course, one of them accidentally discovers that no, actually, they do have an egg or a face hugger or something on board packaged away in secret storage. And so they freak out. And it becomes clear that the cyborg security officer actually stowed away an alien to take back to Earth without anyone else knowing because he has secret orders. And so, of course, the crew goes crazy. Maybe one person, the one that has the extreme PTSD, just immediately breaks down, starts like sobbing or shrieking, knowing that the creatures are there on board next to him or her. Another guy might be like yelling at the security chief, like, what the fuck did you do? We all agree the captain gave the orders. Why did you do this on your own? And another person's like, we can't take that to Earth. This is madness. This is insane to even think you could do this. And the cyborg security officer, of course, isn't getting very emotional because he's really cold and like a psychopath. And he's just telling him, these were my orders. We're all expendable. We're taking this to Earth no matter what. All right. Your fears and your desires are irrelevant here. And I will do everything to finish the mission. And so one of them, or a few of them, they might come up with a plan to flush out the cargo, like just jettison into space. Or maybe right in that moment, right in that scene, one of them will be like, fuck this, I'm going to go destroy that right now. And so he like walks towards the where this thing is being held and to like put it out the airlock. And the cyborg will just like get in his way, put his cyborg hand, like grab his head and just immediately crush it. And just like the head explodes. And I'd want it to be really sudden and violent, like unexpected. Because usually in shows and movies, when somebody grabs somebody like by the face or the throat, they're like squeezing. And then the guy who's being choked out is like making noise and his face turns red and he's shaking and they're fighting and they go back and forth. And it's so predictable. And usually they live. Here we have the guy just like grab the character who you think is going to be one of the main characters and just crush the head. And of course, the rest of the crew just like shrieks and jumps back, right? They can't believe that the cyborg just killed one of their fellow crewmates like nothing. And so it shows how serious he is and what he's willing to do. But it also shows his capabilities because he's a cyborg with that hand. He has like incredible human strength, inhuman strength. And so I like to do that because in the episode right now, there's really nothing special about the cyborg. Like, yeah, he has a blowtorch, but that's stupid. Like, how often is he going to use that? It's even in the episode when he used the blowtorch to seal the door, the alien broke through it and like he just like grabbed it and opened it in like 2 seconds. So the blowtorch was useless. It looks stupid. It's just dumb. So I would give him actual abilities that are scary. Like you'd be like, wow, it'd be scary to be stuck in the room with this guy because he has those kind of abilities and he's a psychopath. And so you do all that just by that squeeze in the face and burst in the head like a watermelon. And so once the crew freaks out, I'd have like one guy think he's going to fight, but everybody else pulls him back and they like retreat and leave the room and they lock the door and seal it against the cyborg. And of course, he's pounding it and starting to break through it. And so now what are they going to do? And so they have to come up with a plan really quickly to try to take out the alien and the cyborg. And so already, maybe just 5 minutes into the Maginot storyline, we already have relentless action and surprises. We have conflict and tension. This is what people want out of an Aliens show or movie. Just nonstop, something you can't stop watching the screen, right? And you want to see what's going to happen next and what's going to happen next. And so from here, what happens is pretty simple. Basically, I would have them decide to go and flush out the egg or the facehugger or whatever while avoiding the cyborg. So maybe the cyborg would stop pounding on the door and it's all quiet. They go out, they sneak through an alternate route to where the thing is that they want to get rid of, the egg or whatever. And they take it and they're going to put it in the airlock. You know, they're just about to hit the button. And of course, the cyborg shows up and he stops the process because he kind of knew what they were going to do and he was waiting. So he gets there in time to stop it. And so like maybe the canister will fall or something like that. And so that's how the alien gets released onto the ship. And later on, I would have them decide, you know, once they realize that things are out of control and the alien's loose, that they're going to blow up the ship just like Ripley did. But the cyborg would stop them in time too. So it's kind of like you'd feel like a gut-wrenching moment where they're trying to make the right decisions. They're acting logically, which they didn't originally, I don't think, in the episode. They just kind of let whatever happen and go with things. And yet they're still not able to quite pull it off because the cyborg is so powerful and evil, right? He has the human guile and cruelty, but he has that mechanical toughness. So he's just too difficult for them. So he's killing them, you know, one by one, and then the aliens come out and they're killing them too. And so you have chaos breaking out on board. Now, one interesting thing I would do is I would keep Mr. I think his name was Tang. I'm not certain, but I think it was the synth. He would be in this. And just like they had in the episode, he would be obsessed with that woman because I think that's kind of interesting, even though they didn't handle it really well. And so, contrary to expectations, in my version, I wouldn't have the synth be evil or work for Yutani no matter what. So he's not like Ash in the Alien movie in part 1. Instead, because he's obsessed with that girl and in love with her, he does everything he can to help her and to save her. So he's kind of a good guy, in fact. And I would have him probably die sacrificing himself to help her against the cyborg. And when the synth and the cyborg end up fighting, I would have it be a huge dramatic fight scene where like they're swinging punches and like ripping chunks off the wall when they hit the wall. Like they're very powerful. So you're kind of thrown off and you realize like, whoa, these guys, these humanoids, they're kind of scary. And maybe the scariest of all is either the cyborg or the hybrid, which Wendy becomes, because they have that human element that the synth doesn't have. The synth is kind of simplistic mentally by comparison. So I think this would set you up for the rest of the season too, even though these characters, or at least the synth, Mr. Tang, is going to die. I did have one idea that's a little more extreme than anything I've said so far, in that it would change the base storyline. But I think it'd still be a good idea to consider. And that is, instead of having the aliens infest the Maginot and crash onto Earth and potentially infest Earth, or at least threaten Earth directly, maybe have the ship crash into the moon and infest the moon colony and then spread to Earth. So the aliens wouldn't get to Earth until maybe halfway through the season or even at the end of the season for season 2. And the reason I would consider doing that is that it would be a kind of ramping up of the tension that I think the show needs. It should feel like almost like
the tail of a face hugger around a person's neck, just like squeezing. Like you get that unrelenting pressure and tension and like dawning horror as you realize how bad it is right now and how it's only getting worse. And so, actually, a show that I would consider as a model for the kind of mood that I think this show needs would be For All Mankind. Ronald D. Moore is the writer there. He wrote for Star Trek The Next Generation, which I mentioned earlier is one of my favorite shows. He also did DS9 and Battlestar. And he's pretty good. Battlestar is one of my favorite shows. DS9 is one of my favorite too. But For All Mankind and Battlestar, to an extent, what those two shows do really well is they're always building up to the next big set piece, the next big moment of action in space. And so as the characters get ready, they have a plan. Something always goes wrong, and you almost watch in slow motion with dawning dread as like their crazy plan in outer space just kind of goes wrong slowly. And the characters have to react. And sometimes characters die, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the mission is ruined, sometimes it's not. It's unpredictable, but it's always fun. It's like delicious watching something go wrong in slow motion. And you always want to see how these guys are going to get out of it. And I think that show needs that kind of that feeling when you're dealing with these aliens potentially infesting a ship, the moon or Earth. It should be getting tighter and tighter and closer to more, basically to doomsday. And so the way I would do it is extend it, that whole process, by first doing intermediate steps, like more time on the ship, potentially the moon, then like a freighter going to Earth, and then finally somewhere on Earth. And you have that nice long transition, which is doom getting closer and closer. The last thing I have to do is handle how to merge the Wendy and Maginot storylines. And so the biggest change I would make with the crash is to have the ship go down near the Prodigy research facility where Wendy already is somewhere in that area, instead of like in the middle of Singapore or something. And the reason I would do this is to increase the pressure on the CEO of Prodigy to want that ship, because it's right there. He could see it. He wants to go in so bad and take it, even though it belongs to Yutani, the other corporation. As soon as the crash happens, I would have the Yutani CEO call the Prodigy CEO. So we would see this in his office on the screen. And from the way the Prodigy guy reacts, we could tell this never happens. They don't talk. So this is important. Something big is going on. And the Yutani CEO would tell the Prodigy guy that he has to remember that this ship is theirs, and they expect him to respect maritime law, salvage law, whatever. He must not approach or enter the ship for any reason. The Yutani Corporation is sending an elite search and rescue tactical team, and they will kill all intruders on site once they get there and see anyone around or inside the ship. And they'll be there in 6 hours or a day or something. So that puts the clock on for how long the Prodigy CEO has to get in there and figure out this secret. And so, of course, the CEO, the Prodigy guy, tells Yutani, yes, of course, I'll respect the laws. I'm not going to approach. But as soon as he hangs up, we could tell from how he's speaking to his assistant that he knows something huge must be going on with that ship from their response. And so he immediately sends a search and rescue team of just normal people, like maybe some scientists and some guys to like check for bodies and stuff like that. So this is not a tactical team. It's just search and rescue. But they don't report back. They disappear really quickly. So we know something's going on. So he sends another tactical team. He sends another team, this time tactical, which are like human Navy SEAL types with all kinds of weaponry and night vision, like goggles and stuff like that. And they go in. And within 10 minutes, these guys are all dead. And maybe this team would have like a synth or a few synths with them as they go in. And he would be able to watch what's going on with that team through their cameras, just like in part 2, but also through the eyes of the synthetics. And so he wouldn't be able to clearly see the aliens. Like he wouldn't be able to make out what's going on because the camera would be chaotic. and it's kind of like dark inside. But the fact that that tactical team, which are really highly trained prodigy soldiers, some of the best on the planet, and the synths just got tore up within like 10 minutes, it freaks him out. And he realizes that this is kind of beyond his normal resources. Something huge is going on. And not only does he want to get in there to see what this is, but now he's actually kind of worried about his own research facility because whatever is in there could come out and threaten him. When the CEO gets this news about all his teams just being shredded with nothing to show for it, he would be disappointed and also worried. And they're all kind of getting worried now, like what's going on here. And he would happen to look out the window of his office, and he would see Wendy still in her human form and sick, and all her other friends, all the other sick kids, being loaded onto shuttles to leave the research facility. Because remember earlier I said that he was canceling the program. And so he would like look at them and he would say, hold on, let's send them. And so the doctors or his assistants would say, how are we going to do that? We've never done a successful surgery before. And he says, well, we could inject them with even more drugs than normal during the procedure to give them a higher chance. And then the doctors will say, yeah, maybe that will work. But then the problem is all those drugs will have a negative effect on them. There's a chance that after a certain period of time, they're going to start degenerating. Maybe they'll lose, control over their bodies. They'll start spasming. They could have mental, some sort of mental break or something like that, neurological collapse and deterioration. And so he says, that's fine. Do it anyways. But the kids or the teenagers, as I'm making them, aren't told this. They don't know that this is hanging over them the whole time now. And the audience knows it. He would get the kids together and he would tell them, I changed my mind. I'm willing to try the procedure out on you guys. But if I do this, I expect you to do a mission for me that might be dangerous. And some of you might not survive that mission. But I need you to try your best and to follow my orders and to follow the mission. And if you do so, I'll immediately give you complete freedom. You could go back to your old lives if you want. And of course, he's lying, but he's just saying this to get their cooperation and to get them to agree to do the surgery and the mission. And so, of course, they agree. All these kids are rushed into the operating room, and out of maybe 30 kids operated on, only 5 survive, including Wendy, because that's how dangerous and crazy this procedure is. So we only have 5 of these hybrids. She's now the natural leader because of what we showed during training where the kids like her. And she has natural leadership abilities. They trust her and believe in her. So the team does a quick assessment of their bodies to get them calibrated. They get suited up in tactical gear. They get a quick briefing in maybe like an APC or something. The doors open and they walk out or drive out towards the looming crash site. On the other side of the planet, Wendy's brother would get a call from the CEO and he'd be told to scramble him and a team of his to come to the crash site because there's something for him to do. And so that something, of course, is to investigate and work on the aliens and whatever else they might find on the ship. And just thinking about it now, maybe it'd be better to have the brother work for Yutani. So Wendy would be for Prodigy and he would be Yutani, just to get that contrast and that the tension right there on opposite sides. But I don't know. It doesn't really matter. And another thing is, why are they brother and sister? Like, couldn't they be husband and wife or boyfriend, girlfriend? Would that be better? I'm not sure. That's something I'd probably want to think about to change the relationship, just because there seems to be like there'd be more between a romantic couple than just a brother and sister that you could work with dramatically. Because you could do most of the stuff that you do with a brother and sister with a romantic couple, but then you could do more because you have the romantic stuff. Not only that, but with the romantic couple, you have that extra tension that now Wendy's changing bodies. She looks different. And also, not only would she look different physically, but maybe she changes gender too. I mean, I don't know if definitely want to go down that way, but it's something to think about as you're brainstorming possibilities, because you might be able to have some fun with that. If he's in love with somebody and then suddenly that person pops up back in his life and she looks different, maybe a different gender, and she's a hybrid, which he hates. So you're putting a lot of things together. You're really testing the sexual attraction, those feelings, which is good for drama, which is good for the storyline. And there you have it. That's what I saw when I was watching the show and thinking about it afterwards. And that's how I would handle this episode. I know this has been really, really long, but there was a lot of work to do, obviously. Because not only do you have to make this episode better, but you have to set up a season. And as it currently exists, episode 1, it didn't really do anything. It didn't succeed as an episode, and it doesn't set anything up for the season in a real sense. Just stuff happening, kind of a little bit boring. It was only cool because you recognized alien stuff, and we all like alien stuff, franchise. But I had to fix the characters and the plot, starting from very little. And with the characters, I had to give them a little bit of personality, hopes and dreams, and then fears and obstacles within themselves and between themselves to make it interesting and to create enough natural stuff for the whole season. And then with the plot, I had to make it logical so that it proceeded from A to B to C, increasing tension as it goes and relating to the main characters. But that's it. I'll be doing the other episodes. I think 2 and 3 are out already as I'm doing this. And I'll also do other stuff too. They probably won't be as long because I think the first episode of a season takes a lot of work, so a movie would be shorter. But this is how I'll approach things. See ya.